What do you do when God doesn't make sense? My husband, Warren, and I were married 9.5 years. And during that 9.5 years, we traveled all across the United States and Canada and ministered the gospel through song and testimony. We traveled some 200 some days a year and watched God move in amazing ways through imperfect vessels. We would often go into prisons when we would come into a town to do a concert, and there were so many times we watched God just touch the hearts of these men and these women. We were in Saskatchewan, Canada one time, and we sang in a prison there, and 3 days later we got a call from the warden of the prison, and he said, "I just want you to know that after you were here, I went to an air show. And at that air show, I watched 2 planes collide and 2 pilots lost their lives in just an instant. And I remembered what you said, and there that day I gave my heart to the Lord. I surrendered my life to Him." Another time we were traveling up through Detroit, Michigan, and we worked very close with the Salvation Army and their adult rehabilitation programs. And we would go in, and that time in Detroit, Michigan, and I watched, and I stood on the platform in awe as 294 men stood to their feet and said, "I need Jesus to help me with these addictions. I can't do this on my own. I can't win this battle on my own." We were going strong, doing everything we thought. Our schedule was planned out 2 to 3 years in advance. Well, December 2005, we decided we needed a break, and we needed to take that month off the road, and we needed to refresh and just kind of regroup, and we spent that time together. January 2006, we set back out on the road, and on the 7th of January, we got back on the bus and headed to a town called Goose Creek, South Carolina, 9 hours away. It was about 15 minutes before we got to the church. I decided I was done. I had to crawl in my bunk and go to bed, and I fell asleep. During that time, my husband Warren had stepped off of our bus because they had tried to pull it into the church and realized that we weren't going to make it. And so he stepped off the bus to help back the bus back out of the church. And I remember in my mind, I remember hearing tires squeal, and all of a sudden this impact, and I was thrown out of my bunk. And I was on the floor and just scrambling, trying to figure out what just happened, and just trying to regain my footing. And all of a sudden I hear my driver screaming, "Somebody do something. Somebody call 911. Somebody please help. Please call 911. And I turned back to my bunk, and I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, and I was trying to figure out where we were. I was so shaken, and I started walking forward in the bus and trying to tell them where I was. And all of a sudden, as I was making my way forward, our soprano singer, Angie, was coming toward me. And at that moment, I realized, I don't see Warren. He would have been back on the bus going, "My bus." He loved that bus. And I realized he's not here. And I saw the look in her face. And I knew at that moment that the reason I was dialing 911 was for my best friend. See, a drunk driver had come through the lights, and he didn't see our bus, and he slammed into our bus, crushing Warren in between his truck and our bus. And I knew the impact, and I knew how great it was, and I knew no one could survive that. And as my hands hit the wall of the bus, and I began to sink to my knees, as the angels ushered Warren to heaven, and all the chaos around me, and all I could cry was, "My God, I cannot be alone." I cannot be alone. And let me tell you, it was at that moment, that very moment, I felt his arms wrap around me. God hugged me on the bus that night, and he has never let me go. 4 years later, I can stand and testify that his grace is sufficient. No matter what your battle, no matter what your trial, God will never leave you. He will never forsake you. You can make a choice this moment. Just because your life may have been a story of tragedy up until this point does not mean that that's what the second half of your life will be. I refuse to listen to the lie of the enemy and remain a victim of my circumstance, because God says that he has plans for me. He has hope for me. He has a future for me. And I choose to trust in Jesus above all else. He is my strength, my hope, my provider, my salvation. The joy of the Lord is my strength. Choose Jesus. Greater is he that is in me than he that is in this world. It is your choice today. Jesus saves, folks. He truly saves. Choose him today.